One time.
Hi.
Hi, Christy. It's John. We're just about to start the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So it is 1:38, actually 1:39 on Thursday, May 16th, 2019. We'll do the call to order for the Town Government Study Committee. First item on the agenda, can we have an approval of the agenda as written?
So moved.
Okay, motion made, second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Terrific. Public comment. Any members of the public wishing to comment on any items at this point? We do have a discussion with Town Council. I'll be calling Lauren Goldberg in a little bit, and members of the public are certainly encouraged to chime in with that. But if there's anything else anybody would like to bring up now, please feel free to do so. Oh, okay.
Will you be allowing public
Yes.
comments for number 5?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh,
Yes.
Discussion.
Absolutely. I don't know if the minutes were circulated for
I do
April
not have
8th.
them.
They were not, so let's punt on the minutes until the next time. And in light of that, I would say let's give Lauren a call.
Hello, Town of Nantucket.
Hello, Lauren Goldberg. This is John Brescher. I'm here with the rest of the Town Government Study Committee and some very interested members of the public.
Okay, terrific.
You want us to identify ourselves around the room so you have an idea?
It's never a bad thing. I appreciate that.
Okay, we'll go,
Board members first.
sure. John Brescher.
Curtis Barnes.
Linda Williams.
Rick Atherton,
And the public, please chime in.
Jim Barrows,
Clifford Williams. Andy Lowell.
Teresa Williams.
Michael Pearson.
And Christy Ferrantella on the phone.
And Christy on the phone. Thank you, Christy.
And for the record, Teresa Williams and Clifford Williams are in-laws.
Okay.
Because there is a reason why we're all named Williams.
To you,
All right.
you have to recuse yourself.
They're outlaws. They're
so I
outlaws
s-
now.
So I sent, so sort of the purpose of this phone call is just so we can begin discussions on Article 76 at the 2019 town meeting sponsored by Clifford and Teresa Williams, which was ultimately referred to our committee, as well as Mr. Pearson, who brought up the idea of government maladministration a few months ago. And we were hoping to have a discussion with you, Lauren, about sort of the pros, cons, unintended consequences, et cetera, and of what these committees would look like and the implications thereof.
Sure, absolutely. And I did read through that, and I reviewed the Article 76 as well. So I don't know exactly where you want me to start, but I guess that the first thing I would tell everyone is that towns have been moving in the past 20 years since I've been doing this, from personnel committees and complaint-type committees to a situation where supervision of employees is done by an individual rather than a committee. Part of that reason is that, it's multifold. First, these situations typically involve a level of confidentiality, and the more people you have involved, the less likely you are able to manage that. The next issue is that part and parcel of the job of a supervisor is to actually supervise. And so when you introduce a third party, whoever it might be, into that role, it can make it very difficult for the supervisor to actually do their job. It undermines the supervisor. Another reason for this type of a change is based on just the significance of civil rights issues that are implicated by any kind of discipline, and the number of laws and the process for enforcing them have become much more complicated and much more significant. There's potential for multiple treble damages. There's potential for punitive damages. So that's something that's a difficult thing to deal with. In addition, we have open meeting law issues. An individual is not subject to the open meeting law, while a board or committee is. And, I think even those with the absolute best of intentions, it's difficult to comply with the open meeting law, especially, if it's not something you're dealing with every day, and with the public records law. And then because these are records that would involve discipline issues or complaint issues, then there's privacy rights layered on top. So then now we're dealing with public records complications as well. And then finally, the concept of a complaint committee or what I think of as like a super board of selectmen or super town manager function is that you really are taking the executive authority from the individuals who are recognized as those exercising that authority and giving it to a different entity, which now has kind of risen in the hierarchy of being responsive to issues, to a party that really has no authority other than in this judgment role. And that role is much more akin to what a court does than what a town board or committee does. And even for town council, for example, we don't issue edicts. We don't say it is therefore the rule of the land that X, Y, or Z. We might give an opinion. In our opinion, the charter says this, or in our opinion, the charter says that. But it's up to a judge ultimately to make legal determinations of that nature. And so it's unusual to vest that kind of authority in individuals who don't have authority for appointment or for supervision generally.
Could I,
So those are my basic
could I jump
Hold
in,
on,
Michael
let the
Pearson?
board go first, Michael.
Okay.
I do have.
Go ahead,
a
Laura.
question.
Go ahead, Linda, please.
The issue here, Lauren, is that they went through to the supervisory position. They did not get satisfaction, at least a couple of people at the table did not get satisfaction after going through the chain of command. There was nobody beyond the supervisor when there was still a disagreement and still the members of the public they were incurring exorbitant costs, including moving off island with their child. There was nowhere to go above that. One had hired an attorney and incurred substantial legal bills. The other one was trying to go through the Department of Ed. There was why should the members of the public, this is what I get asked all the time, why should the members of the public have to incur these exorbitant legal expenses to compel the town to do what they're supposed to do when the supervisor refuses to do what she's supposed to do or he's supposed to do? Where do they go from there?
Oh, sorry. So Linda, I hear that, but the question that I have for you is, and just think about this from a procedural kind of logistics type of viewpoint. How is a committee going to force another official or committee to do something?
Yeah.
Like really? Because the only power of enforcement is really to go to court. Let's just say that one committee in the town thinks another committee in the town isn't doing its job and says to that committee, do that thing. Well, how? How are we going to make them do it?
What about an ombudsman?
There's no self-enforcing.
What about an ombudsman or an arbiter that town could hire that would hear both sides and make a ruling, because that's done in a lot of corporations? What would stop?
Yeah, again, I come back to the rights of the executive and the rights of the public are set forth in your governing documents, right? And a third party, there would have to be a ceding of authority to a third party to make legal determinations about what parties' obligations are. And again, the only one that I know that can do that is a court. I know a little bit about the situation, obviously, having talked to some people that are in the room. But if we just put that aside, let's pick a different one. Let's pick an employee who says that their supervisor is making them work late, okay? And not paying them for it. So that's a violation of the Wage Act, right? So we can say, if we're the appointing authority for the supervisor, don't do that bad thing, okay? Don't do the bad thing. And if the supervisor keeps doing it, the thing that we can do is fire the supervisor, okay? If we do an investigation and we determine that the facts as alleged are true, then we can fire the supervisor because we gave them an order not to do the bad thing and they did the bad thing. But if we do the investigation and we don't find that the bad thing happened, now we have one person saying it did, we have one person saying it didn't. We've made a determination as the supervisor of the supervisor that what happened was not inappropriate. And I'm not saying that they find that it was appropriate, but they haven't found the evidence to demonstrate that it's inappropriate. At that point, a third party analyzing the same information would be, in the scenario that you guys are talking about, empowered to overrule the appointing authority. It's just not the normal course for the way government works. Now, if you're talking about an ombudsman position whose job it is to, help make sure that the right people deal with the right problems. So, someone's complaining about loud building, and they go into the to the building department and they say, gee, we have a noise ordinance, you're not supposed to be doing that, and they say, oh, well, check it out, and it doesn't get fixed. And so you have somebody whose job it is to say, hey, we've gotten a bunch of these complaints, this is this person's story, who do I tell them to go to, and how do I tell them to deal with that? That's not a super board of selectmen or a super select board or a super town manager. That's a person whose job it is to follow up on complaints. So they're not superseding the role or being put into a role of, super oversight. It's a role of helping supervisors to take appropriate actions in response to complaints, either by sorting out the complaints, by helping to identify the right person, etc.
Well, that may be effective in the building department, for sure. It would have helped that other situation. It might have been effective in the school system. I just think what's happening is that the members of the public are having to go to court and spend a lot of money on attorneys to compel the town to do their job, or compel them to honor an agreement which they signed that they were going to honor, which they refused to honor. Where does that leave the member of the public? So we have members of the public out to lunch here.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it's there. From my perspective, there is no way of compelling a municipality to do something different than it's doing other than going to court. And that's not to say that the court of public opinion doesn't matter, or it's not to say that there shouldn't be, town officials who are willing to listen. I'm not at all suggesting that people's concerns should be ignored or treated as trivial. But ultimately, even if you had a person or a board that was supposed to be able to make determinations, to make findings on issues, ultimately, that board too would not be able to compel action.
Well,
Only a court can compel.
Let's say they prevail, and the person in the aggrieved in the public prevails in court. As you know, I seem to remember that there is only a limit as to how much they can recover from the town in damages. So they're still out of pocket.
Right, yep.
And they're still not getting the town to do what they're supposed to do, and they still have to pay for it to force the town to do what they're supposed to do and honor their agreements in writing. And they can only recover, what is it, $5,000 cap?
No, I mean, it depends. It depends what it is.
It depends on
if it's like a road thing, that's one thing. If it's a civil rights violation, it's a completely different thing.
Okay, because I know there's caps.
There's not a cap.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've seen many communities struggle with issues like these, and they've been resolved in varying ways. In one community, they had a 3-member board, one of whom was town council, who was supposed to hear grievances, not collective bargaining grievances, but grievances, and they were completely ineffective because it was the town clerk, the town council, and I forget who the other person was, but nowhere was there a provision that could give them authority to do anything. They were like so they did hear things from time to time, but there wasn't anything that no action they could take. Now, there's another one where I believe it was a different committee. I don't think they were appointed. I don't think they were elected. But they really struggled because much of the subject matter was about job performance, and job performance is typically analyzed by the supervisor. And so, if a supervisor has certain rules and certain expectations, it may be that we don't love those rules and expectations, but they're the supervisor. If we don't like the supervisor, then it's up to the supervisor's appointing authority to remove them. And most communities, the staff, you want to get, good professional staff to come in. They're not going to work in a place where they don't know who their boss is. They're not going to work for a official who, even if they meet all of that person's expectations, some other elected board might decide, gee, you didn't do the job that we think you should do. Nor is a department head who's answerable to their appointing authority want to be told by another board or committee what they should or shouldn't do. And that's, to me, that creates inherent conflict in town governance. And it undermines, the hierarchy of authority.
Oh, boy.
So, Lauren, this is John Brusher. So those towns that have implemented these, do they continue to do so? Have they given up the ghost, or are they looking for other solutions? Do you have...
Some of them have given up the ghost, and I would say every community that I had this conversation with has essentially decided that is not what we're trying to do here, and it's not worth I shouldn't say not worth, that the complications from proceeding in that direction are too significant. Personnel boards, which again used to hear kind of grievances of people that were unsatisfied or dissatisfied, with responses, with solutions, those are literally, I would say every time a charter is adopted by a town adopts a new charter, they get rid of the personnel board. It's just too risky and too much of a burden to try and balance all of these competing priorities and all these competing authorities. So that the idea of centralizing government, of providing for a strong center, with professional strong center, is intended to minimize this kind of internal strife. Look at the way that department heads the principals are appointed in the school system. The superintendent has sole responsibility for appointing the principals, and the principals have sole responsibility for appointing the people underneath of them. So it's a very clear line of authority.
That's based on the Education Reform Act, correct?
Yes.
I
Yep.
hate that act.
But it simplified the process for holding people accountable.
Sort of.
The concept is that if the school committee is unhappy with the superintendent, the school committee has the ability to remove the superintendent. And if a group of parents or a group of teachers is unhappy with a principal, then the superintendent has authority to remove the principal. And they know exactly who they're answerable to, and they're able to either meet that person's expectations or not. We definitely are strong advocates here of progressive discipline, meaning if something happens where an employee doesn't meet expectations, that be papered so that we're able to look at that over time and say, here's all the efforts we made to kind of address this issue, and we were unable to, so as to create an appropriate record of interactions on expectations. But ultimately, the idea in town government for sure, and in city government, is that the chief executive is ultimately in charge of how this works. And if you don't like how things are working, and I'm not suggesting anybody, is at fault, because again, we're talking kind of generally here, but that the chief executive, whether that be the school committee or the select board or the superintendent or the town manager, that they need to be kind of the clearinghouse for these types of issues. And the idea of a centralized manager, superintendent, town manager, is that they have the ability to resolve these issues without having to air personal issues in public.
And if you can't get the superintendent or the supervisor
The public have a
to do what
chance
they're supposed to do, the members of the public are sort of set adrift. Unless they
Well, I mean, I think there's other options. There is the ability to write letters to the entity. So if we take, the select board or the town manager, someone could write and explain their situation. It's harder to ignore a written document than it is to ignore a phone call. Again, I think the same advice would go to individuals. You need to paper your interactions if you're not satisfied with the result. And that doesn't cost anything, at least at the beginning. And if, let's say, it's a particular department that's a problem, when you write to the department head, you write to the town you copy the town manager as well, or whoever the appointing authority is. Or if it's a principal, you copy the superintendent. You can call up and make a formal appointment with that person. But you can try to prevent someone from being reelected, through good old-fashioned campaigning type of issues, or through recall, if they're elected. But those are all legal processes that are established by law for, or not the complaint process, but the election process is established by law for that reason. I mean, you see things turn over in communities where people are dissatisfied with the reaction of government. And then, the government has the ability to take what it's learning from the concerns that are raised. Another type of thing is you could have ask for the appointment of a government study committee to consider, which I know you guys are, but to consider, what are the concerns that we have. It doesn't mean you need to solve the problems, but you can say, look, these are the concerns, and we feel like there needs to be, whatever it is, a point of contact for, significant problems. We think there should be a communications person in town hall whose job it is to connect, members of the public with issues to the right problem solvers. And maybe you figure out a way to have that person report statistics to, at a public meeting. We got 17 complaints this week, 3 about the building department, 3 about this, 3 about that, of which, the DPW director made, follow-up calls or whatever. So you're making it a little bit more of a transparent process. But even with that, I mean, every time you layer in another position, another level of responsibility, it creates work. And I'm not saying it shouldn't, but you just have to be cognizant of it. Obviously, there's a cost of hiring another person. There's a cost of training that person. You need to make sure they're doing their job in a way that makes sense and that's effective.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to suggest that why don't we let some of the public chime in.
Okay, can
while
I
we still have
chime?
you.
Michael Pearson. I feel that you're looking at this through the lens of schools, town employees, and voters get the occasional mention. What concerns me is what I would term maladministration, and I brought this up before the committee last year, and I'm sure you're aware of what maladministration covers. You said, you've got problem solvers within government. what happens when you run out of problem solvers? And one of the big problems I see in the town charter is this. If the town, and first of all, I'm not mentioning people's names by name, just by position in the town charter. If you have a town manager who is a rogue actor or who just doesn't care, then under the charter as it stands right now, if there's a problem, it reaches the ultimate authority, which is the town manager, and the town manager just doesn't care, then what's your next step?
It's to speak to the select board, because
Well,
they're the
really,
appointing
so-
authority for the
sorry to
town
interrupt.
manager.
Sorry to interrupt. I tried that with a significant matter, and the select board don't really care. And if you look at the charter, I'm sure you're aware of the Nantucket charter, the only thing that connects a select board here with the town manager is a single line in the charter which says something to the effect of the town manager shall be responsible for the effective administration of the town to the selectmen. Now, what does effective administration mean? There's no precedence for it. There's nothing down in writing about what it means. And it allows the Board of Selectmen to wash their hands, absolve themselves and say, town manager's there, deal with the town manager. There is a huge gulf between what the town manager does and the power that the Board of Selectmen have over the town manager.
John, is it okay for me to respond?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I feel as though one has to kind of start with looking at the structure of government from the general laws. And the general laws say that the Board of Selectmen is the chief executive authority of the town, or select board. And when you have a charter, the charter takes the pieces of authority that the board would otherwise have and it redistributes them in certain ways. So maybe different portions of different jobs go to different people. It suggests that a town manager do X, Y, or Z things, and you might have departments, all that stuff that would be truly left up to the Board of Selectmen and town meeting in the absence of a charter. So that's the first thing. Any authority that's granted to the town manager under the charter is authority that typically came directly from the executive branch, whether that's the Board of Selectmen or, for example, appointment authority like the town planner would otherwise be appointed by the planning board, and the zoning administrator by the zoning board, and conscom agent by the conscom. So the law is saying you, specific individual, have these jobs and responsibilities, and that's deemed consistent with the general laws for purposes of the function and form of government. But it also carries with it that those positions that exist, especially those that are found in law, continue to have, the authority that's not specifically delegated. And case law is extensive that says when you're the appointing authority for a particular individual, then you get to supervise them. So in my view, based on the Nantucket Charter, I look at that and I say that Nantucket Town Manager is answerable to the Board of Selectmen. Period. It doesn't mean that the town manager has to agree with the Board of Selectmen or can only do things that the Board of Selectmen want the town manager to do. Under state law, without a charter, there's a provision, Chapter 41, Section 23B, that says that the town administrator or executive secretary works by and through the Board of Selectmen. And all the acts of that person are the acts of the selectmen. So when you have a charter, you're changing that so that the town manager has independent authority. But you don't change the fact that the town manager is an appointee of the board and therefore subject to its supervision.
Well, I think that makes a big difference. I've never heard that before. And I'm not sure if anybody else hasn't heard that before, but I believe the Board of Selectmen haven't heard it before. The town manager here is essentially the sixth select person.
So, in the big picture, when you look at the charter is what defines the role and the scope of authority of a town manager. And then under state law, town managers are able to enter into contracts with boards of selectmen, or selectmen are able to enter into contracts with town managers, setting forth the terms and conditions of their employment. And so, this isn't about the current board or the current town manager. It's just a general conversation about the charter itself. But again, I would go back to, the select board is the hiring authority, and they're the contracting authority. And so if there's an issue with performance, job performance, after an attempt to speak with the individual about it, just like we would in any circumstance, then the next step is the appointing authority, and it's not court, from my perspective.
Well, that's very encouraging from from my perspective. That's something that I didn't know, and as I say, the way things are running, I'm not even sure if the Board of Selectmen knew that.
Can I just
Well-
maybe make a comment? Lauren, it's Rick. My impression of things is that occasionally issues get on the board's agenda, and usually they get there for a reason. They might come from the town manager, but they might also come from a citizen petitioning an individual board member. Andy Lowell might petition Jason and say, hey, you need to discuss this issue or this problem. Get it on the board's agenda because we're not doing very well on it. And almost all the time, not all the time, the board members try and be responsive. And so I'm a little puzzled here why apparently there's a feeling, Michael, that the board is totally hands-off. And I'm not one to be protective of the relationship between the board and the town manager. I have my own perspectives on that.
Yeah.
But the board is 5 people. They are all free to act individually and talk at a board meeting. And if they're unhappy with the chair not putting something on the agenda, they should be responsible for making that point known in public. And then you, as the petitioner, are gonna have all kinds of opportunities. But at some point, if you can't get a board member, I'm speaking to all of us, I don't mean you personally or anybody, Andy, I'll pick on Andy because he's not doing it right now, to respond, then I think what Lauren said initially is the issue. You gotta kick them out, and you should elect somebody else. Get busy. And if you're not getting busy, your recourse is not to just sort of moan about getting a different process, because the process is already there, at least in my judgment. Somebody has to act on that process. Okay?
Right.
Anyway, that's sort of how I feel.
John, if I may, I mean,
Yes.
I agree with that analysis. Again, not being about the current board or the current manager, the relationship between the board and the manager is their issue. But the way that the board chooses to supervise, I mean, each of you elect the selectmen. And so you can go and talk to a selectman that you know, you can ask for an appointment, you can, email them knowing that anything that you send actually is subject to public records law, but you have the ability to approach them and or the manager to say, hey, here's my problem and I'd like it to be dealt with. And again, as I suggested earlier, anybody who feels that they're not going to be heard or that they've tried to be heard and haven't been, the mechanism to deal with that is to ensure that it's in writing because it's subject to the public records law. So it has to be maintained. I think the idea of how do we get government to be responsive is truly the thing we're talking about, and not how can we force government to do the things that we think they need to do. In reality, first of all, government officials are presumed to be acting in the best interest of the municipality and in good faith. There's a legal presumption. So anytime that a complaint is brought against an individual for doing or not doing something that they are supposed to do, the court, the way the system is established, the court gives credence to the notion, in the absence of information to the contrary, that the individual is acting in the best interest of the town and in good faith. And we couldn't survive a day in government without that. I'm sure all of you have had interactions with members of the public, and I know there's members of the public there, I'm just saying with other members of the public, where a person acts completely unreasonably, and you do your very, very best to deal with them, It might happen at the grocery store, or maybe when you're driving on the road, or whatever it is. And if you had a conversation about it later, this happened, and they had a conversation about it, you and they would completely disagree on how the matter was handled. It doesn't mean either of you are wrong, but it does mean that somebody needs to be able to kind of continue on, and we need government to be able to function. My basic experience with all of these types of issues is that if we are undermining the authority of the supervisors, whoever they are at every level, by making everything that they do subject to what I guess I'd call second guessing, it's shifting the paradigm from what they are entitled to under law, which is an assumption that they're doing their job with a good attitude, in good faith, to an assumption that maybe they're not. And I don't see how you govern efficiently in that kind of an atmosphere.
But you can't really control maladministration where it happens either, can you? Under the system that we have right now. If permits are denied or fines wrongly imposed, I know some of these you can go to court for, but there are some issues which are just not worth going to court for. If it's a $10,000 issue, you've been denied something by the town, nobody's listening to you, it's not worth taking to court. So
Well, typically there are appeal methods with respect to permits or licenses, so that you have the opportunity to take that. So, like, let's say a building official denies you a permit, you have the ability to go to the ZBA and have a hearing on that, whether the building official made the right decision. Same thing with the Board of Health. In the permitting context, you often are provided with a hearing and the opportunity to have the people, that would be directly affected, notified directly of the fact that you're requesting that kind of a relief. To my knowledge, although some people do hire attorneys to help them with that, not everyone does. And, I think that the different formulations in state law, you talk about due process, people are entitled to the process that they're due, and you look at the statutory protections in place, and that's why with zoning changes we have notice to abutters. That's why with conservation work we have notice to the CONSCOM and a request for approval to do the work. So there's things built into state law that are supposed to assist with this idea of what happens if there's maladministration. If there's maladministration to the level that it's negatively impacting somebody's rights in a way that's personal, then the court is the place to deal with that. It may also be, we have this situation a lot. I'll talk about it in the public records context, where an individual municipal employee, not in Nantucket, using the computer inappropriately, they have violated the town's computer use policy, which is a fireable offense, even if what they did wasn't illegal. And it goes the other way as well. Sometimes if a person does X, Y, or Z things, that's a fireable offense. And so that's a disciplinary issue. And that's the job of the supervisor. And again, if you're not getting the kind of response that you want from that, then there needs to be some thought about how to make responsiveness a preferred outcome rather than non-responsiveness. And again, I think the punishment side of things, that to me is just a really inefficient way of doing it. It changes the dynamic between the employee and the employer. It changes the dynamic between the public and the government, and it makes it government of responsible to all residents, which it is, but it's typically through the elected and appointed boards and department heads. So I guess when I look at that charter, I don't see that there's a big hole in that regard. And, you know, just kind of candidly from my experience with other municipalities, I don't see activity in Nantucket with respect to department heads and the manager and the board of selectmen that raise any particular giant flags for concern from my perspective. Just, you know, and I only hear about what I hear about. But I understand every community has different values, and if responsiveness is one of the values that you guys are looking to, responsiveness to citizens is one of the values that you're looking to prioritize, then there are ways to do that that don't involve the creation of a super executive or a empowered tribunal, municipal tribunal. And I think that's probably a place to start looking at what other things could you do to build in the importance of responsiveness, and whether that is a position, you know, that's meant to be a communicator between the public and the town, or whether that's adding something to the town manager's job description or to someone else's job description, whether it's revisiting the language about the board of selectmen and the town manager and the charter. I mean, those are things that you can do that don't change the kind of dynamic of government in a way that will make it difficult to administer.
Can I just have a brief comment? Because I like what Rick says, I like what you said, I just want to make sure that I understand it. So if something goes wrong between a citizen and the town, then the citizen ultimately can bring that matter to the Board of Selectmen. As per what Rick was saying, you can canvass a selectman, and then it's up to the board, if they wish, to bring the town manager in and ask what is going on, because they supervise the town manager.
Yeah, I mean, in kind of an elemental way, that's exactly what it is. And
I want it to be fundamental, not elemental.
Yes, so sorry, fundamental. The bottom line is that the town manager is responsible to the Board of Selectmen. So in some cases, the Board of Selectmen may lack authority to compel the town manager to do this or that thing, but they're the appointing authority. So they have a relationship, and the town manager works for the board, even though the town manager has independent authority.
The school board and the superintendent of schools don't work that way. Once you get
What do you mean?
The superintendent does his own thing. He doesn't take direction necessarily from the school board here.
Can I butt in for a minute?
Yeah, I want you to hear from Teresa now.
So this is Teresa Williams, and I've heard what you said and all the things that you should do and all the rules you should follow.
None of them
and
have done.
The acting in good faith, and I absolutely followed all those rules. I had an attorney, and I did everything that I was supposed to do. And at the end, the superintendent, who actually is probably the only person that can help me with buckets of paperwork sent to the school committee, I was turned away by everybody saying they're not in charge or responsible. They're not the boss of the school committee, can't make the superintendent help me. The superintendent didn't basically care because he was opposed to me taking my child off island to begin with. So he was like he was hostile towards me. And so, once again, everything...
I know, oh, sorry.
So when I went to the town administrator, people just kept washing their hands of me, saying, I'm not responsible for those people. So, I hear
Well,
you say...
I think there's a huge divide, and Linda had mentioned this because of the Education Reform Act. The town side has no control over the school side, and that's intentional. It was in the general laws before. It was strengthened under the Education Reform Act, and the superintendent. See, there's a line of case law that talks about how you can't force a municipal official to exercise discretion in a particular way. If a statute says that the decision's up to them, then it's up to them, okay? And I'm not suggesting that the school committee can force the superintendent to exercise discretion in a particular way, because they can't. And so if that's what you heard, I mean, you know, and again, Teresa, you and I talked about this at town meeting, you know, I don't know the circumstances of the particular details of your situation, and obviously, I know it's been very difficult, and, nobody wants that for anyone, so please understand that I'm not coming from a place of criticism. In the big picture, the school committee is elected, and if they are not supervising the superintendent in a way that the people of Nantucket feel is appropriate, then their opportunity to make change is at the polls.
Well, I guess I'm
And
interrupting
that's why
again.
That didn't help her son at all in
When
the
I,
situation.
but I have a signed contract. I have a contract, a legal and binding contract with the town. That wasn't
So again, I mean, I can't speak to that, I haven't seen it, but that's what courts are for. The court would enforce that. Even if there was a committee whose job it was to decide if municipal officials were in the wrong, they couldn't compel anyone to do anything. Only a court can do that.
And she has to pay for that.
I mean, she'd have to get advice from her lawyer as to whether it was possible to ask for costs, but that's not something that we could advise on, even if we had an enforcement, committee or a compliance committee or whatever you want to call it.
Right, and I guess
We'd
what I'm
still
saying
not
is-
be able to provide legal advice to individuals about individual concerns about the town's compliance with, what they purport to believe are legal obligations.
Right, and my ship has long sailed, so this isn't even about me anymore, but there's got to be something in place for other people that are going to be like me, whether it be with the school or the building department, because you can't ruin your life and spend money you don't have when you've already done that, and then people don't honor their agreement, who represent the town. These people.
So there's no way for the town to impose a third-party complaint process on the schools, period. There just isn't. The law will not permit it.
So you haven't
It
violated
would be a
anybody's...
violation of the education
I'm
reform
not
law.
gonna stop, I'm just getting going. Hey, that wasn't a violation of civil liberties. This child needs an education. This is common sense. We're all grown-ups. I mean, this is insanity, all the things I've been listening to you talk about.
So my perspective on that is that the question of what a student is due under state law is a legal issue that was reviewed. Now, again, I don't know the specific details, but that it was reviewed and handled in the way that's appropriate. There is a way to make a complaint to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and then that's up to a court to decide if the town handled that, or the school department handled that correctly. The town manager, the Board of Selectmen have literally no authority. Zero.
Okay. Cliff Williams, can I ask a few questions?
Well, because Teresa, are you done?
Yes.
Because Teresa did go to the Department of Ed and didn't get anywhere up there either, because they couldn't compel the superintendent to honor the special ed agreement either. So, other than Teresa spending another $30,000 or $40,000 in court to compel the town to honor the decision and give her child an education, because I had 5 kids out of my 8 in special ed, and it wasn't easy. They didn't honor the IEPs. It went on and on and on. But my kids were able to get in and get out. Teresa's was not. That's forcing her to pay $40,000 minimum to go to court to compel the school to honor the agreement they made for this child's education. That, I think,
Linda.
is where the frustration occurred for everybody who was involved with this situation.
Right. I mean, the problem is, Linda, even if you had a third party, and again, with schools, it would be inconsistent with the Education Reform Act. But hypothetically, let's say you had an elected super board, okay, that decided whether matters were handled correctly by municipal officials. You couldn't enforce anything without going to court. And that costs money for the town. There's no way to do it. Let's say that this enforcing board is like, this is it, we've had it, multiple violations. That it has to go. You have to go to court to enforce it. And
Certainly.
and when you think about that, that's a difficult place. It's a difficult place for a court. I can tell you, courts don't enjoy when different parts of the town sue each other. It's not an easy situation. for anyone. And I'm not suggesting that it, that it was. I understand, obviously, how frustrating the whole process was. I talked to Teresa about it at a town meeting. I hear from the descriptions and the way that you guys are talking. I understand that this was an issue.
Well, we have a reserve fund. The Board of Selectmen and the town administration could put forth a little judgment and get some money and send the kid to school. There's an idea. But anyway, let me ask you this one. Clifford Williams, who does the charter represent? Who is it there for? Who does it protect? And who does it, I guess, like I say again, represent? Is it town administration? Is it rogue employees? Or is it the taxpayers and the citizens of the town of Nantucket?
Well, forgive me if I think that that might be a loaded question. I think there's only one answer. I mean, the town charter belongs to the town, to the town's people. It is essentially the charter for the town. I mean, the Constitution for the town. But just like the Constitution, it's not self-enforcing.
Right. So when you go to the town and you have a problem with anybody or anything, and we're not talking little problems like, I want the wall to be painted gray or something like that. We're talking about a child not being educated, a building permit not given. These are pretty egregious. Like I said, I think they're a violation of civil liberties, but I could be wrong. This is why, and I've been in unions and forced to be in unions most of my life. Whenever we come to an impasse, they have a mediation board. And if you go to court, before you go in front of the judge, they encourage you to go in front of a mediation board. I'm just not sure why we couldn't do that at the town, and that you'd probably even do it at the town if you went to court with the town or for the town or whoever it is. Before you went to court, they'd tell you, well, go speak to the mediator. Would they not do that?
Why do you think the mediator has the ability to encourage a mediation or a settlement of a matter?
So we don't waste
The
a lot of
reason
money.
is-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that, and because ultimately the court can resolve it. That's where they get their power.
The court.
You think about a mediation that's entered into outside. I know Linda had mentioned, an employee mediation. Somebody has to have the power to make whatever the thing is that's going to happen at the end for it to work.
Now, the court
And-
vests
and
the
everyone-
power in
Sorry, go
the
ahead.
mediator, correct, Lauren? The court would be the one that would invest the power in the mediator to take care of this situation, come back to the court
That's
with
right.
a settlement.
Yep.
But the court has to order the mediation.
Yep.
So my point is, when you've come to an impasse with the town, and I've seen, I was just furloughed, or actually I had to work without pay for about 5 or 6 weeks. After about a month, most people are going bankrupt. So what big corporations do to most people is they take you to court. Or if someone wants to bankrupt you, they take you to court, because the average person can't afford to go to court because it's not free. The court system really doesn't represent poor people. It's just a bunch of people with money beating each other's brains out till the other guy leaves. That's my opinion. So when I come to an impasse with the town, and I was shown that there's been some egregious behavior, and town administration will not do anything to this employee who's violated the law, shouldn't the town charter get me a lawyer so I can fight the rogue employee? Or in a sense, it almost seems like my tax dollars are going to protect the rogue employee.
So, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the way that representative government works as a general matter. If the town has a certain amount of money it can raise by taxation and has a certain amount of money it can spend in any given year, and the authority to authorize representation of the town for a particular purpose has to be located in a single entity. If it's not, then the town's priorities, however, whether you agree with them or not, can't be carried out. If you had the ability to go to court because you didn't like X, Y, or Z, or that someone else didn't like X, Y, or Z, there's nothing to say that your concern, and again, I'm not suggesting it in this case, I understand that there's legitimate, significant issues that people have, but any frivolous anything would be entitled to the same type of response as a serious issue. How would you differentiate between that? Who would make the decision? Where would the money come from? What if it would be over the appropriated amount of the budget? What if it's not something the town's insured for? What if the town believes that you, the accuser, is wrong? How can you have a government that is not under the direction of the people elected or appointed to lead it?
Right, but there has to be accountability. I work for the Federal Aviation Administration, and if I was to do something wrong and I was proven to be wrong, nobody's above the law. I would be prosecuted. So therefore,
But I don't think anybody, I don't think the town would suggest that anybody's above the law.
well, when you don't,
You know,
if you have a charter and the charter represents the people, and you clearly make a point and you hire lawyers, in this one case, a judgment was passed and still they didn't honor the judgment. In my situation, I brought a lawyer in, and they exposed the individuals for what they are. I've since gone to court, and they've been caught lying in court. I've reported that to the Board of Selectmen and to the town administration, and there's been nothing done. So where do I go? If the charter's not going to provide me with counsel and the ability to sue these employees or attack these employees, I'm just left outside. The town becomes a punk corporation.
Well, I mean, again, I don't see that kind of an approach works, and it seems to me that if you have, and again, I don't know what your situation is with the town, but I mean, the enforcer of judgments is a court.
Okay. Right, so the charter doesn't represent the people. It can't. It can't under your premise. It just can't.
I don't agree. I think just like with the U.S. Constitution or the Massachusetts Constitution, it is by and for the people. The people are the ones who approved it, adopted it, and it is there as a guideline for a framework for governance. If I'm upset with the federal government and I want to make the federal government do something, I have to go to court to force the government to do that. It's not going to do it just because I think I'm right. And that's a government issue. I mean, that's so that we can get through the day-to-day. You could be the most reasonable person in the entire world, and you could be 100% right about everything you say. But the person, that you run into at the grocery store, or the unreasonable person who refuses to let you pass on a highway, or any of those people, they could be the most unreasonable people in the world. And the law has to deal with everyone the same way. We can't make a judgment about whether this complaint or that complaint merits a law, assignment of a lawyer. I think what we're talking about are relationship and administrative issues. And again, I think if there's an interest or that's a priority of this body to make a recommendation, I think there's a different way to think about it. I don't believe that you will have a functional, effective, staff and governance process if you're taking certain authority from, you're taking certain portions of the essential nature of supervisory authority and you're giving them to other people. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I just think there needs to be accountability at every level. I'll give you another scenario. I got involved in town government because I work at the airport and I saw a lot of illegal activity at the airport. I went to the Board of Selectmen again. No one did anything. I went to town administration. They did nothing. I got on the finance committee. We were able to form a committee, the paving subcommittee, and not until we talked to the Inspector General's office, I was told from every level of government here in Nantucket that everything was fine at the airport. They were making money. Everything they're doing was legal. My job was threatened. I was threatened. And after the Inspector General got on the phone with us for about 20 minutes, the wheels came off. Everything they were doing was illegal. So what would you suggest an individual do? That was a situation where I was lucky enough to get some help from other members of the Finance Committee. And we exposed them, and you know, there was $14 million essentially missing in the end, even though they said there was no wrongdoing. Those are pretty egregious
But it
situations,
sounds to
and
me
nobody,
like
nobody went
you
to
were
nobody went to
able-
prison.
But it sounds to me like you were able to address those issues.
Yeah,
And
only
the
because
town
I was
doesn't
lucky
take
enough
people
to get
prison.
help.
The town doesn't do that. It would get referred to the DA, and it's up to the DA whether to prosecute. The town doesn't prosecute crimes.
Right, but the town knew there was crimes, and because of the individuals involved and the different, you know, friends we have up in Beacon Hill, I mean, I think it was all pushed under the rug. It was pretty, it's all documented. It's out there that $14 million was somewhere stolen or
I mean, again,
abused.
I don't know the specific details about this, but
Right.
again, I mean, I think the DA is always there to
Mm-hmm.
deal with potential criminal issues, and
Right.
you know, the fact that someone's accused of a crime does not mean, from a municipal labor and employment perspective, that we have the ability to just fire them because of that accusation. And, you know, it's complicated and frustrating, and I think for municipal officials and supervisors as well, that, you know, we have great suspicions that people are not doing something that they're supposed to, and, you know, we want to address it, we want to take quick action, but we have an obligation to you know, to follow the kind of due process requirements that are established by law, and otherwise the town's exposed to lawsuits from the employee that can go on and on and on and be exceptionally expensive, again, because of due process rights, because of civil rights violations. So, you know, I think there's a bit of a rock and a hard place when it comes to staff, and to think that, you know, a separate board that isn't involved with day-to-day administration of government making decisions about whether certain staff should be, you know, hired, fired, disciplined. You know, to me, that just, it's opening the town up to lawsuits, literally opening the door and saying, please, sue us.
Well, the paving subcommittee, for instance, we don't have, as a finance committee, we don't have any authority, but we did have the ability to meet and take some resources and prove that laws were being broken and things were wrong at the airport. And if we hadn't gone there, we'd probably be about $50 million in debt right now in the direction they were taking that enterprise fund. And I think you even came down and had to teach a class on enterprise funds, because people are still confused on the fact what an enterprise fund is. They act like it's a sovereign state when it's not. It's just an accounting method for a town.
I agree.
Yes,
I agree. And on the
exactly.
other hand, like the Airport Commission, and I'm sure you know this, has significant statutory authority under federal and state law, and there's only so much that the town can do to influence, you know, decisions made there. In any of these cases, though, it's not. This isn't a you know, a fact-specific discussion. It's not about a particular issue. It's not about a particular frustration. This is more of a, I mean, from my perspective, it sounds like more of a cultural or, you know, town culture question about how do we build in accountability. And I think that's a different question than whether you should have a third-party committee of some sort making decisions of this nature. And that's my personal kind of take on it, because I don't see legally and practically how you make an enforcement committee of the nature that you're describing work, or that you provide for legal counsel for disgruntled citizens. I don't see how that works.
Well, I mean, to get back to the paving
Let her get
subcommittee.
back to one thing first, what
Okay.
you just said. Lauren, is there a way to build in accountability into the charter more than we have right now?
I mean, I haven't looked at the charter with a goal towards reforming it or revising it for that purpose, but, you know, I haven't been directed to do that. So if I was asked to look at it, I think there's probably things that we could take a look at in terms of what's reported, how it's reported, what authority, you know, is given to who to do the supervision, and look at, you know, where the buck stops ultimately. So I think we could look at that. You know, I think you could take a shot at revising something, but I remind you, and I think it's very important to remember, that the job of being a supervisor, of being a manager, being an administrator, is a really, really tough job. And people want to do it only if they have the authority that they need to do their job and carry out their obligations. And so when you fiddle with that, it can create problems because people's authority is undermined. So, again, I think it's possible to conceptualize a more, trying to write something into the charter to give more kind of supervisory authority over these types of issues. But I don't know that ultimately, just having that in the charter will make that happen.
Could bylaws be used instead of amending the charter?
No. The bylaws are subservient to the charter.
So let's get back to the paving subcommittee. Once the paving subcommittee went to the Inspector General, at least they exposed the fact that laws were being broken, and then finally, only then, was something finally done. Was everything done that should have been done? In my opinion, no. But see, at least that committee, so if it's the power that you're worried about, maybe we don't have the power, but at least we have a committee that can stand up in front of the Board of Selectmen and say, listen, you violated the law, whatever it may be, and report to them directly so that something can be done.
To me, the idea of an enforcement committee is too little, too late. It's already happened. These things have happened.
Yeah, but going
What you're
forward,
trying to
we
do
haven't
is
learned a thing. We haven't learned a thing since the airport. I've been here 8 years. We haven't learned one thing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We need a committee that you can go to so they can say to the town administration, no, you're wrong, or you're right, whatever it may be. But you keep saying, well.
You do. You have the ability to do that at the polls. So that's
That's ridiculous.
the place.
No, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. That's wrong. You seem to be more worried about the town administration's ability to govern than the fact that we have to represent the people in the town of the Nantucket, where their liberties seem to be second to the authority or the ability to govern by, like you said, a job is very difficult. I ran line maintenance at Logan Airport. It's very difficult. But you either take the job or you don't. They get paid very well here. So either you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing. And like I said, these are egregious situations. These are not, differences of opinion. These were violations of the law, and it's pretty straightforward, and nothing's been done about it.
Again, I go back to then the appropriate place to deal with that is in court. One place to deal with it is the DA. Another place are the state agencies that exist to oversee these types of things. So procurement-related issues, IG, AG. Criminal violations, DA. Civil rights violations, DA or AG. There are state entities that are there to help with this type of situation. Everybody is expected to do their job. That's the premise of government. We're expected to do our jobs. And if we're not, and it rises to the level of being a crime or impinging upon someone's rights, then a court is in place to deal with that.
If you can afford to go there.
What I said earlier, and I think maybe, and this isn't, ultimately it's a policy, what you guys decide to do, I can't make you do or not do anything, and I'm not trying to insinuate that I can. That's not my role. I don't make policy decisions. But it's ultimately the people's government, because the people votes for the government. And the charter, it's like our federal constitution. I think if you think of it like that, it's a little easier to understand. If I think the U.S. government is violating my civil rights, there's no attorney for me to get, to represent me in that. There's no...
The AFL-CIO could.
Whatever.
But they're a private entity.
Sure, and they're there to help people like you.
But so a private entity can help here as well.
Right, but so that's the answer then. So we're not, the charter doesn't represent the people. town administration, there's no recourse for
I disagree.
maladministration.
Cliff,
We have to get to the point here. Rick, stop, Rick,
I,
Rob, stop. I'm
I
talking.
disagree with you.
Yeah, Clifford, it's.
I know you don't like to hear the truth. It's brutal.
It's
It's
not
brutal.
here
It's
to
gone on too
represent
long. It
the
has to
people.
end. It has to end. So was my sister's article illegal? Because it's been voted in twice. Was it illegal, what she did?
I'm sorry, what?
Was the article, the way it was represented and put forth to town meeting, was it illegal?
It cannot accomplish its purpose. It's legally unable to accomplish its purpose. In order to act on that, to give the authority the way that it's listed here, you would need to have a change in your charter, and I explained that to her as well.
Okay, so they should have guided her with that, in that direction then, town administration or board of selectmen, or somebody.
Well, and,
Not their
I mean,
job.
again, I
Nobody's
think
job.
it's been referred to this committee for it to be reviewed.
Okay.
Mr. Lowell, did you have something?
Only a comment for the board after. This is
Okay.
good. She's still listening with a lot of information.
Yes, Mr. Barrows.
Hi, Jim Barrows, African Meeting House. I've been in front of the Board of Selectmen, I can't count how many times. And I hand-delivered 5 letters to the town hall, to the individual selectmen. And I hand-delivered one to the leading detective, Klinger. And every time I go into I was on the agenda once, and in public view, I mean, it's like, I should be asking the wall a question. Every time I ask them what's going on, no one can respond to my request. And the last time I left there, I said, it's okay, but in the near future, you'll be compelled to respond to my request. I mean, this is the Board of Selectmen. I wish there was a third party I could go to, seeing that I can't get no response from these people.
Jim, are you talking about the vandalism?
Pardon?
You still talking about the
I'm
vandalism?
talking, please. I wish there was a third party I could go to that would give me an answer, because the Board of Selectmen's not giving me an answer, the town manager's not giving me an answer, no one's giving me an answer, what's going on up there? It's been over a year. What was the question?
Was it the
The
vandalism?
racist retro act that was committed at the African Meeting House, niggers leave. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah? When do we get to the bottom of this? Yeah? When does somebody give me an answer? Right? They requested me to go into the police department so I could sit down with their investigators, and I responded through my attorney, I will sit down with the investigators in my house or at my uncle's house, who's the William Del Carmo, federal civil rights activist consultant, where I feel comfortable and safe. Ever since then, 0. No one's contacted me. No one's responded to my request. So shouldn't we have a third party here that we can go to and say, hey, what's going on here? You know? Jeez, you know.
I think the problem comes back to there's no enforcement mechanism. Even if there's a committee, there's no enforcement mechanism. It seems to me that what you're looking for is not a punishment of things not done, but how to encourage and make it easier, or make there be more of a reward. And I'm kind of putting it in quotes.
Justice,
for
equality, for
responding
everybody,
to
for the
requests.
good people on this island. And let's not cover this up any further. Let's get to it.
Yeah.
You know, this is only 3x14 island, right?
But
Come on now.
what's
Come smelling like soap, one or the other.
he's not getting a response, an adequate response after repeated, and he's not the only one who's gone in there and asked for what's happening to that particular situation. They're not getting a response. Now,
Right.
lack of response, he can go in until he's blue in the face, but they're refusing to give an adequate response to whether Clifford or whether Teresa or whether Jim or whether Andy. That is not an uncommon problem in this town of the hierarchy, where you don't get an adequate response. If you
Right,
get a
so,
response at
yeah.
all.
But so, okay, so I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but there's not, a legal, there's no committee that you can create that's going to fix that. That's not a legal issue in this way. That's a relationship issue. That's a who's holding office issue. That's a question of who you choose to be in your government, and then who they choose to have as their town manager, and then who the town manager chooses to have as employees. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't think this is resolved by a charter change.
Excuse me for one
The
second.
police can't.
Excuse me for one
I'm
second.
sorry.
When you have five Board of Selectmen up there and a town manager, and I've been there several times, and I ask a question, and not one out of the six can say yes, no, we'll get back to you, right?
Like,
Or whatever
again,
little bit
I don't
they
know.
gave
I don't
me.
know those
No,
circumstances,
that's-
but what I can tell you is that
They're not doing
you know
their job.
that's a relationship question. That's a question. I don't know what they can or can't talk about. I don't know anything about the incident issue. But all I'm saying is that's not something that a committee fixes. No enforcement committee can fix that. That's a matter of, are you satisfied with who you have chosen to sit on the select board? Are you satisfied with the way the select board is supervising the town manager? Those are different things. And as much as I would like to be able to give you kind of a roadmap to say, oh, I think you could do it, like, even with a committee, that doesn't change any of this. These things are not things that you can fix by writing something down. This is something about whether you and you know, look, the appointing authority for you know, town officials, town government, that's a choice that you all make every year when you go to the polls. And there's no the relationship between the government of the people by the people. That's what it is. If you don't like the government because you don't like the way that they're functioning, then you change the government.
You know, I have a roadmap, and I'm not going away. And I can go home tonight and look in the mirror and say, thank you, God, for letting me do a good day, you know, and doing the right thing, you know? But we got to get rid of some of these rotten apples that, you know, and this little bit of a community that has the power to do what they want for certain individuals. You know, I've been here, I've lived it, I've seen it, I've smelled it, I've tasted it, you know? So you can tell me anything you want, but you're 100% wrong, you know? Because that's how I feel. That's my personal feelings, right? And when I leave here today, I can look in the mirror and say I did the right thing today. I stood up and I spoke the right words, not the cover-up words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrows. Does anybody else have anything else? If not,
I think
Lord.
there's some stuff, John, that we can talk about, increasing the accountability, increasing response time.
yes, I was going to say,
and
Just with
all
her.
those things.
yeah, we can,
Yeah.
but we should thank Lauren very much for all of her time and effort.
Thank you, Lauren.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren, remember, you promised me that you would look at the charter to see what we need to update and fix.
Yes, I did promise that. And I will do it.
And if you can see, while you're reviewing it, if you can see where we can build in accountability or a response time or those kinds of things, that would help.
Well, I certainly can. I think one thing that I just want to leave you with is that even if you don't wind up making a recommendation about language in the charter about something like this, you certainly, without, and obviously everyone has their own personal stories, but without raising particular issues, I think it's fine to make just a recommendation for further consideration, or to say this is an issue that the committee heard and talked a lot about, and enforcement, you know, blah, blah, blah. And although we didn't wind up making that kind of a recommendation due to whatever the reasons, you know, this is an issue that's exceptionally important. And there's no, you know, there's no downside if that's something the committee really prioritizes or believes is a priority to address. It's not necessarily the form of government that might change, but maybe it's just, you know, the decision making about how to deal with situations like this. So, you know, I think you guys have the ability to make a recommendation if you believe that one is appropriate.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure. Oh, Rick, yeah, one last thing.
Yeah. I think this is as much for us as a committee, and Linda, I'm a little reluctant to have Lauren go off and do whatever she's been asked to do without our committee discussing more about what that means. I mean, maybe you have an idea of what you're talking
Well,
about.
months ago,
And that-
we talked to her, and
and-
she said
Well,
she would review it.
I'd like to hear
and
more
update it.
specifically, otherwise.
That's fine. Yeah.
She's off doing a lot of
Sure.
things. that-
Well, we can give her some better direction.
Yeah, I
And so,
think we
Lauren.
need some
yep.
discussion about that
Because she
direction.
Yeah,
said there's been
that's fine.
changes in state law, things
Yep.
like that, that she wanted to go through it and make sure
So,
that it was all up to date.
we'll-
State law, I understand, I'm talking about the responsibility and the
Yeah,
issue
that-
Oh,
we're
yeah.
talking about today.
Yeah, we can talk about all
Oh,
this.
yeah, and
Yep.
I wouldn't even dream of starting on that without you guys giving me direction about what you're looking for.
Perfect.
Linda and I had discussed just the things that would make sense to think about because of changes in state law since the last time you guys did this. And I did promise Linda I would do it. Of course, we went immediately into full swing town meeting season here, and so I've just been inundated with day-to-day town meeting questions. But I certainly will put you guys at the top of my priority list and just take a run through for any obvious issues that need to be addressed.
That'd be great.
That'd be terrific. All right, great. Thank you very much,
Thanks, Lauren.
Lauren.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your giving me the opportunity to participate in this meeting. It was certainly interesting, and I hope, both that from what I take out of it, I hope that people understand that, we work for the town of Nantucket by and through the board, but it's the town of Nantucket. It's not individual people. And, we do our best to kind of keep that as our guiding principle. And, the law is the law, and it's not whether a particular person is somebody that someone likes or doesn't like that guides the answers and responses that I provide. So I want people to understand that.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right,
thank
take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was healthy and interesting and, yes.
Robust.
I would say a deep
Coffee
breath.
hors d'oeuvres. Treats now.
Yeah, right. Who brought the baked goods?
Therese,
Well,
do you remember?
Sorry.
I suggested that you contact the Attorney General at one point. Did
Yes.
you ever do that?
I did not.
Well, that was one recourse that I felt you had 6 months or longer ago, and I wish you had. Because I think that is, she mentioned that along with the district attorney, but I really feel the Attorney General, hearing your story, might have opened an investigation that would have been helpful.
She went to the Department of Ed how
It
many
could still,
times?
I don't
Yeah.
care, I'm
right,
saying the
Curtis,
Attorney General.
it still could be, because it's not, even then when I spoke to you,
Yeah,
he was about this far from being out of school.
I know, understand.
So I can
You
still
gotta
go
get
down
out.
that avenue.
I really feel that might be helpful in the long run for
Right.
you to follow up along those lines and see, I think they have a capability to do something that we can't do here.
Right, and now that it sounds like really nothing, the town
Yeah, but
select
that
board
is a
on that.
recourse that's there and to
I
any
think that's
citizen, I
right.
really would encourage you to pursue it and
Because I've
Good
seen
luck.
damages.
And
Well,
not
that's-
even that. I did, well, we on tape here. I did talk to another attorney because, just to see where I could
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
because, he did not get a diploma. And she, you can't sue a school system for not educating your child. You can't.
Well, it's funny because my niece also walked across the stage and did not get a diploma. She got a certificate of attendance.
Yeah.
But you can't pass, you have to pass the MCAS here, and they don't make
But
provisions
the whole,
for kids with IEPs. I went through that 5 times.
Right. Anyways, yes, thank you for that, and I'm going to head in that direction. I was
Go get
headed in
'em.
a bunch of directions.
Interesting.
But
Mr.
you
Lowell.
can't do it again.
Yes, thank you. My issue is long gone. It happened many years ago, but I'd hate for anybody to have to go through what I went through. It didn't have anything to do with the school, simply a public official that used, it was an unethical situation. Cannot ethics or unethics be proven without a court of law?
No, you
We-
go to the Ethics Commission.
Yeah.
I've done it many times.
Okay.
You go
Yeah.
to the Ethics Commission at the state, AOCD, whoever's up there at the state, and you file a complaint, you can do it anonymously.
Yeah.
And then they must, within so many days, do an investigation, and then they let you know the results of the investigation as to whether they're going to continue or not continue with it, whether they found a cause or not.
Well,
You
They
can do
go
it in
there.
writing or on the phone even.
having a group, whether you implement a committee, or whether a ombudsman or a mediator is put into play, I think it would give the general public a more comforting feeling that there is somebody to turn to. Council made it clear that they will have no legal authority to change anything over and over again, but I still feel that there'd be a comfort for many people to have somebody to turn to when you feel you have no one to turn to. Now, I didn't realize, Ethics Commission, I mean, when I first served on a commission here, it was the Concom in '97, and immediately you're handed the pamphlet about ethics. And the one I remember specifically being a builder at the time was not to solicit work while you're on a field inspection, simple enough. And if I went against that, it would be pretty obvious. But simply having somebody to turn to would be helpful, I believe. I don't, however you.
Yeah.
I think what she mentioned was a complaint person who handles interactions, a communication person, a complaint person who handles
Well, and that can steer you in the right direction. We realize ultimately you may have to hire a lawyer, but most people would rather not.
I'll send it out, I know I have it
as to
somewhere.
where you go next, who do you talk to
Yes.
next. They have all the procedures
There you
down
go.
as to who you talk to next, where to go next. They can't give you legal advice, but they can certainly have a list. In Teresa's case, you gotta talk to this person, then you gotta talk to this person, then you gotta talk to this person if you have an issue with the SPED department. Clifford had an issue with the building department, you talk here, 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 and here. These are the expectations. So I think that's not a bad idea to have somebody who's well-versed in
Yeah.
the process in all the different departments as to where you go next. Because you go to the BBRS, or you go to the Department of Ed, or you do this or you do that. Or if it's a criminal complaint, you go to the DA, Keefe down there in Falmouth, or whoever. There isn't a clearinghouse in the town for that kind of information as to what exactly the process is. That is something tangible that can be put in place.
Right, because if you don't know.
The odds.
You're on your
She's
own
got the
trying to figure out
answer.
where
See,
to go
there you go.
next.
Well, I made the
An hour
point
and a
about
half.
this paving subcommittee. We have no power. We just reported
Yeah.
and said, yeah, that guy was right and you were all wrong.
Or
And
tell
then
you
finally
about it.
something was done. But if that hadn't happened, that sinking ship would have just kept on going. So that was my point. If you don't want to change the charter and take away, God forsake, the authority of the person who's breaking the law, you at least have a committee that can report and say, that guy's breaking the law. What is someone going to do about it? Until that happens, nothing happens.
But Teresa would have been helped great,
Oh.
had there been someone there to say, this
I think
is
a lot
what you
of-
do.
a lot of
They
these
hand you the
issues could have been
pamphlet, and when you put a
helped.
kid into SPED department, they hand you the pamphlet of your rights, but you're like,
No, but I'm gonna disagree with that. I
I
know
know.
my rights and I did everything and I have a signed document,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's pathetic.
which is legal. And Yeah.
The whole thing was
it's like beating a dead horse.
crap, so.
Yeah, this isn't
Okay.
West Roxbury, this
But
is the town of
somebody needs to be
Nantucket.
able to help them,
Yep.
guide them, without giving legal advice.
All right, well, thank you all. I hope you found that helpful.
Well, yeah, but if there's an outcome,
Yeah.
And James, there's a reason why.
all to do about nothing. That's why.
There's a reason why
We're
they
not
didn't
worried
get an
about
answer.
it. Like, I heard
So,
it, though. I'm not going away.
Yeah, no,
What do we
but
need
there's
to
a
do
reason why
to
they're
move
not
forward
giving you an answer.
to figure out what we are
Obviously,
or not
no,
going
we
to
did.
do?
Well,
they do.
I'm gonna say, so I'm gonna suggest that we skip over our timeline for the summer until we have Tucker and Christy
Okay.
here.
Is
But
Christy still with us, or did
Christy
she
is,
leave?
no, she left about,
Oh,
An hour ago.
coincidentally, she left right before we started getting into issues with the select board, just interestingly.
yeah.
I think that this is a good topic to have on our next agenda to discuss in further detail, and I think
Yeah.
it's something that we should have Tucker and Christy in on as well.
Definitely.
Next week, Monday's not going to work because we're not going to get an agenda out on time.
Then we got Fagawi weekend.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you. Yes.
Those-
Thank you. Let's clarify. Yes, Memorial Day.
How about first week of June, please?
You want to do first week of June?
Sooner is better.
I agree. I agree.
What about next Thursday afternoon, just like today?
Hopefully, I don't think the Yahoos will be here.
Not yet.
Oh, you're so
The who,
bad.
the Memorial Day.
Thank you for your time on this.
All right.
you.
Why don't,
Guys, thanks, Jim.
why don't we tentatively plan on next Thursday at 1:30?
23rd?
Let me know if I
23rd.
need something more than that, Kate.
What is that?
That's just a
That's something-
breakdown.
Will you have time to get it posted and get an agenda?
Yes.
All right,
What are you worried
go
about?
back to the airport, find the surgery.
And their children.
Tell them to go away.
Was going in a bunch of different
But
directions.
I was
Just not to-
thinking about
Thank
All right, 1:30.
They need to look higher up in the chain.
Might need
I
help
just want to
writing
voice that
something.
to her, because it's all right.
John?
All work.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Linda, come over and
I don't know if we
hit
met
your head
ever
or something, but I won't.
Good job. Jim
Not that
Barry.
I get it.
wave at you.
I'm hugging
usually
and
get fired
shaking
off.
hands, so
Hugging and
I
shaking.
Kissing babies, doing all that stuff.
There you go.
I'm gonna let you go.
All
with this.
right, any other business?
Yes.
23rd at 1:30?
Thank you.
Yes, thank
This-
you,
no,
Curtis.
I mean, apparently, we have to do an annual ethics review, and I want to make sure we
I will,
don't forget
I will
to do
send,
it.
I will send it out.
Send out the link.
I will
I'll
send
sit
out
there
the,
and
I'll
do
send
it.
out the
I got a
link.
link or something from
I haven't
somebody.
gotten
I'll
the
send-
link
I'll
from
send it-
anybody.
Yeah.
I'll send
I
it to
just said,
everybody.
did you get it?
I get it from 10 different committees, but I haven't gotten one yet. Maybe is it every 2 years, I don't need to do it, but I just do it every.
I will,
three years.
I will
It says it's
check.
once a year.
Yeah.
I will send it out to
By law, it's
everybody.
only once every 2
Annual
years.
state ethics requirement.
It's actually every
Okay.
2 years, but we do it every year.
All right, any other business then?
Yeah, what was the,
Date and time will be next, the 23rd at 1:30.
all right,
Okay.
point of information.
Yes, sir.
I heard last night at the
Oh.
select meeting that we're appointing a new assistant town manager, another one.
I heard that job was posted as well. I didn't know if
Where's
anybody.
Greg going?
He's staying. There's
No,
going to
they're
be a
adding
second-
a new
So
job.
There will be
we're
a
gonna have
second-
Another
So
assistant.
she never
Assistant.
has to come out of her office?
a
but-
second assistant town
So
Linda, I
manager.
cannot
question
answer
is-
these items.
You know.
I'm just curious enough that maybe by next week, maybe you could ask someone
Be
what
happy
that
to.
means as far as.
We also never got what I would consider an organization chart.
Well, perhaps this new person can help.
You know what I mean? In other words, what we got was, anyway.
The thing
for
in the
example,
town,
in the town report.
That's bullshit.
And so we don't have a freaking clue.
They're all over the place, these organization charts. It's easy enough to get. I'll get one.
Well, but you know what I mean? The one in
Yeah,
the
little- in a-
town
in a-
charter,
in a-
for example, shows public safety, but the fire chief and the police chief both report directly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't show that. That's just one example.
Well, last
There is
night, that
one.
report, the consultant's
Yes.
report, very specific, I got this
I'm
big.
not even going to discuss that because it's a bunch of Looney Tune craziness.
Well, they are
You
talking
don't know what they're
about
talking about.
the NTDEC independence and why the director of Plus doesn't report directly to the town and fit within the town system. There's this whole little empire over here with NTDEC and
By
planning board.
contract,
Pardon?
by contract with Libby and the selectmen.
The
There's a lot they
point-
didn't know, and that section is completely ludicrous because it's not based on any fact at all. So
Well,
don't start,
let's put
don't, it's not even on the agenda, don't bring it up in here.
Well, I was actually going to ask to put it on the agenda, and I was going to get the copies of the reports.
I would not do that. The report is under extreme objection.
By
And I would
whom?
not get involved at all with
Well,
something
let's
that's
put
not
this
even
way,
factually
I'm curious
correct.
to know if it would affect what we do.
No,
Well,
because
I
it's under
I
contract.
agree it should be an agenda item. So that now you have two requesters.
There you go.
And not so much the report, but just the
What,
the contractual relationship, to
Yeah.
me, is what's it. As Linda knows, I feel perhaps differently than she does on that issue.
Strenuously so. And we're not
So
going back
we
to the
can agree?
freaking dark ages where there's no accountability.
All right,
The
so,
public is very happy the way it is.
so we've got,
oh, really?
we've got things for our,
Because if you
For
have
our
a
next
problem, you
meeting.
got somebody to go to.
all right, can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
3:12?
adjourn.
Adjourn at
Thank you.
3:12?
3:12.
3:12.
Well.